Paris, November 1948. Nikolai Strelnikov was 42 years old, an engineer, a practical man. He had been going through his mother's belongings for 3 weeks, box by box, shelf by shelf. The accumulated material of a life lived in progressively smaller rooms. He had expected to find her in these rooms. Her precision, her composure, the quality of a woman who had managed grief, exile, and the slow erasure of an entire world without once allowing the managing to show. He found all of that. And then, on a Tuesday evening in the third week, working through the last shelf of books she had carried from Saint Petersburg to Stockholm to Paris without ever leaving one behind, he found something else. A small book, French poetry, the spine soft from decades of handling. He fanned the pages and found nothing, until the inside back cover. His mother's handwriting, precise and deliberate. 2 words, Alexei Nikitin. No date, no explanation. A name in handwriting so careful it could only have been placed there on purpose, kept for 50 years, shown to no one. Nikolai stood in the room for a long time. Then he went to find out who Alexei Nikitin was. The military record came first. Captain Alexei Nikitin, Imperial Russian Army, born 1872, Novgorod, second son of a minor noble family, old name, reduced means. Caucasus, Manchuria, January 1904. Wounded at Liaoyang, August 1904. Rose to general by 1914. Served through the First World War. Did not emigrate after the revolution. Stayed. Nikolai read the last word and understood, with the instinct of a man who had grown up in exile, exactly where the record was going to end. 6 weeks after his second letter, the reply came. Arrested 1936, died February 1937. Labor camp east of Omsk, 64 years old. Standard charges, paperwork for a decision already made, bearing no relationship to what a man had actually done. He had served the revolution with everything he had given the old Russia. In the end, the new Russia made no distinction between its enemies and the men who had bled for it. Nikolai set the letter down. He looked at the book of French poetry on the table, the 2 words in his mother's handwriting. He had always known there was something she was managing that he couldn't see, some specific weight beneath the composure, always present, never named. He had sensed it his entire life, the way you sense a room has been recently vacated, the air slightly different, something just removed. He was beginning to understand what it was. He wrote a third letter. Saint Petersburg in 1903 was a city that performed itself. Palaces mirrored in the frozen Neva. An aristocracy so elaborate in its rituals that the only unforgivable sin was stepping outside them. Irina Volkonskaya had been performing her role since birth. Her father had selected her husband with careful arithmetic. Count Fyodor Strelnikov, 41, wealthy, capable of absorbing his future wife's considerable intelligence without feeling diminished by it. The announcement was planned for spring 1904. Irina had said, "I will not embarrass the family, Papa. I will do what is required of me." Her father heard agreement. What she had said was something closer to a door closing, slowly from the inside. She read books her father had forbidden and quietly replaced. She held opinions sharp enough to make men who outranked her shift in their chairs. She watched St. Petersburg perform itself with the clear, uncomfortable gaze of someone who understood every mechanism and found none of them sufficient. She was, without knowing it, waiting. In October 1903, at a reception at the Winter Palace, she found out what she had been waiting for. He was standing at the window, not performing the indifference that men in that room performed, not watching the room with the calculation of men who needed to be seen watching, simply standing, looking out at the frozen Neva, with the genuine stillness of a man who had arrived somewhere and had not yet decided what he thought of it. She had not, in 24 years inside this world, seen anyone look at it that way. She crossed the floor. "You look uncertain," she said. He turned. No performed surprise. He looked at her with the same quality of attention he had been giving the river, direct, unhurried, as if she too were something he was still making up his mind about. "I am uncertain," he said. "Is that permitted here?" Almost nothing honest is permitted here. A pause, then, and yet here you are. In small doses, she said, honesty reads as wit. No one objects to wit. He looked at her for a long moment, then he laughed. Not the social performance of a laugh she had catalogued 1,000 times, but the real thing, sudden, unguarded. The laugh of a person caught off guard by something they hadn't expected to find. She felt in the precise center of her chest something shift. She chose not to examine it. Irina Volkonskaya, she said, before someone tells you who I am and you adjust accordingly. Alexei Nikitin, before someone tells you who I am and you lose interest. She did not lose interest, not then. Not as it turned out, ever, though she would spend a considerable portion of the rest of her life attempting it. What followed was not a romance. Saint Petersburg society would not have recognized it as one. 4 conversations across 4 receptions over 2 months, each unremarkable in isolation, collectively the most dangerous thing either of them had done. He had watched the edges of the empire from the Caucasus and understood what the center refused to process, that the people at the periphery had not consented to being peripheral. She had reached the same conclusion from books her father had removed and she had replaced. He did not look surprised. The difference, he said, is that you read it. I watched it. Which is worse? He thought about it, actually thought, not performed thinking. Reading gives you the comfort of wondering whether you understood correctly. She had never had a conversation where the other person was simply present, not managing how they were perceived, not calculating the return, just honest. She chose not to examine what this meant. In January 1904, he was posted to Manchuria. The Russo-Japanese War began 6 days after he left. She stood at her window on the gray January morning. His regiment moved along the embankment. The horse's breath rose white in the cold. She found him at 200 meters by the way he sat in the saddle, upright, unhurried, a man at peace with the direction he was moving. There had been no language that would have permitted her to say what she wanted to say. She watched until the column turned east and disappeared. Then she went downstairs and said nothing to anyone. She would not understand until many years later that this was the moment, that everything which followed was shaped by what she chose not to say at a window on a January morning. He wrote 2 letters from Manchuria. The first was careful, correct. A soldier writing from a place where correspondence was read before it was sent. The second arrived in April, and it was different in a way she felt before she had finished the first paragraph. He wrote, "There is a thing that happens in the field that no one in Petersburg understands, and no one who has been there can explain to anyone who hasn't. You find very quickly what a man is made of. Not courage or cowardice, those are too simple. You find what he is attached to, what he is underneath what the world has told him to be. I have been thinking about the window at the Winter Palace, about honesty in small doses. I believe I owe you a larger dose than I have given. I am not certain I will have the opportunity to pay the debt. I am setting it down so that the debt exists on paper, even if I do not." He did not elaborate, written to the exact edge of what he was willing to risk, and stopped. She read those 2 paragraphs 11 times. She memorized them without intending to. She placed the letter inside the book of French poetry on her shelf, folded between pages she no longer needed to read because she knew them entirely by heart. What she did not know, what she would not discover for another 40 years, was what it had cost him to write those 2 paragraphs. The Field Hospital at Mukden. August 1904, 3 in the morning, the ward quiet except for the breathing of men in various states of damage. Alexei Nikitin had been there for 6 days. Shell fragment in the left shoulder, the kind of wound that is survivable if you decide it is. He had made that decision. He was holding her letter, the one that mentioned Strelnikov, the ring, the Tuesday afternoon. He read it twice. He set it on the cot beside him. He looked at the canvas ceiling for a long time. Then he took out paper and wrote what he was actually carrying. Not the managed version, the true one. The one that admitted a debt, the one that admitted the debt might outlast him. He did not know if she would understand what he was saying. What he knew was that carrying it without saying it had become, somewhere in the long nights of that field hospital, no longer possible. Some things, once they reach a certain weight, have to be set down somewhere. even if only on paper, even if the paper's all there is. The Battle of Liaoyang broke what remained of Russian confidence in the war. 70,000 soldiers, 3 days, a retreat the dispatches called strategic, and the survivors described as something else entirely. Nikitin came back to Saint Petersburg in September, thinner, the left arm held at a slightly different angle. Irina found out on a Wednesday. He had arrived. She had from that moment until Friday to decide what she was going to do. She did not sleep Wednesday night. Thursday morning she wrote him a note. 1 page. Deliberate handwriting. I know you have arrived. I know where you are convalescing. I would like to see you, not at a reception, not with an audience. I am asking plainly because I have exhausted my patience with available indirection. IV. His reply came within the hour. 3 words. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. She arrived at his apartment on Vasilyevsky Island without a chaperone. In St. Petersburg in 1904, this was not a subtle gesture. This was everything she could say without speaking. The rooms had the quality of minor nobility, good furniture chosen to last rather than impress. Everything in its place with the precision of a man who lived alone and had made his peace with it. He met her at the door, the left arm held slightly wrong. He did not perform wellness and she did not pretend not to notice. You came without a chaperone, he said. I know what it means, she said. He stepped aside. She went in. He told her about Manchuria, the real version. The gap between what Petersburg believed was happening and the actual texture of watching an empire lose a war it had decided in advance it could not lose. When he finished, the room was very still. The debt, she said, the larger dose, from the letter. I would like you to pay it now. He was quiet for long enough that she heard a cart pass on the embankment below, the wheels on stone rising and then fading. I thought about you in Manchuria, he said. Specifically, not the way a man thinks about home, not a category. I thought about that window and that conversation, and the fact that I had spent 31 years in a world where no one said an honest thing, and you walked across a room and said one, and I did not know what to do with it. He paused. The Neva moved outside. In the field hospital at 3 in the morning, with your letter beside me on the cot, I understood that what I was carrying was not something constructed from 2 months and 3 receptions. It was real. I wrote to you because I needed that to exist somewhere outside of me. Even if that was all it ever was, he looked at her directly. I am telling you plainly because you asked plainly, and because I am finished with the available indirection. The room held the weight of this. She wanted to reach across it. The distance between them, measurable in feet, felt at that moment like the only distance that mattered in the world. I am engaged to Fyodor Strelnikov, she said. The announcement is published. I am telling you the exact shape of what I am standing inside, not as a refusal, as an honest account of the situation. He nodded slowly. He understood the difference. Then I will tell you the exact shape of what I am standing inside, he said. A second son from Novgorod, a wound and a record and no estate. Nothing your world recognizes as sufficient. A pause. I can offer you what I offered at the window, honesty, specifically the large dose. The winter light moved slowly across the ceiling above them. If I asked you to wait, she said, 6 months, while I speak to my father, while I find out whether there is a different arrangement possible, she paused. Would you wait? Yes. No hesitation. 1 syllable, clean and immediate, the most uncomplicated thing she had ever been given. Then I am asking you to wait. She stood. He stood. The space between them was very small. She put her hand out, not romantically, not with any performed gesture, simply the human act of offering steadiness to someone on uncertain ground, and he took it that way. His hand was warm. The grip was brief and complete. At the door, she stopped. I will be well enough for active service by January, he said. There is talk of another posting. She understood. January was 3 months away. 6 months was not guaranteed. Then I will speak to my father before January, she said. She went out into the October cold. She sat in her car for a long time before she started the engine. She made her case to her father on a Thursday in November. She prepared it as an argument, not a plea, logical, structured, objections anticipated and answered. She made it with everything she had. He listened. When she finished, he was quiet. Then, you are asking me to break a published engagement, to place the Volkonsky name in the position of having given its word and withdrawn it. I am asking you to consider Irina, quietly, not with anger, with the particular sorrow of a man whose decision was already made and who is sorry for it. I am not refusing because I cannot follow your argument. I am refusing because honor is not something we apply when it is convenient. The moment our word becomes negotiable, we are no longer the thing we have always been. She looked at her father and understood something she had not fully understood before. He was not a cruel man. He was a man so completely formed by the world he had been born into that cruelty and duty had become, for him, the same material. He was doing the honorable thing. He was also ending her. In his architecture, these were not in conflict. I will honor the engagement, she said at the door. I will not embarrass the family. Her father heard acquiescence. It was not acquiescence. It was a decision. From the outside, these can look identical. They are entirely different things. She wrote to Alexei that evening, not the careful version, the true one. My father will not release the engagement. I have done what I said I would do. I cannot do more without destroying things that are not only mine to destroy. I want you to understand it was not a small thing I placed on the scale against you. It was everything I had. Duty is not a cage I was placed in. It is what I am made of. The same thing that sent you back to a war you had already survived once. I cannot ask you to find this equivalent to what you are losing. It is not equivalent. Do not wait. That is the last honest thing I can give you. Do not wait. His reply came Saturday morning. One paragraph. I understand. I believe you. I want you to know, not to change anything, not because you should carry this differently. I want you to know that what happened between us is the most real thing I have encountered in 31 years in this world. I say it because you were honest with me, and I owe you the same to the end. I will not wait. I will do what I was made to do. I hope it is enough. A. He reported for duty in January, exactly as he said. She married Fyodor Strelnikov in April 1905. He was everything her father had promised, kind, quiet, capable of receiving her intelligence without requiring her to diminish it. She had a son in 1906, Nikolai, dark-haired and serious. She was not unhappy. This was the worst possible thing about it. Unhappiness would have had a shape, something to point at, to name. She knew from sources she never sought that Nikitin had been promoted, decorated, had not married. She filed this in the place where she kept everything she was not examining. Then 1914, the war that consumed everything it entered. Strelnikov died at Tannenberg in September. She wept for him genuinely, a good man who deserved better. She raised Nikolai with precision, wrote 14 letters of condolence because there was no one else, and worked because the labor of grief is one of the few things that makes grief bearable. She did not think about Alexei Nikitin. She thought about him every single day. She saw him in December 1914, a reception at the Anichkov Palace, one of the last such gatherings before the war made them indecent. She was there because her cousin had asked. She almost didn't go. He was 42. The wars had removed everything decorative and left only what was structural. He was standing near a window, of course near a window, with that quality of honest, unhurried attention unchanged in 11 years, because it was simply what he was. For a moment standing across the room from him, the 11 years dissolved entirely. The engagement, the marriage, Strelnikov's death, the whole architecture of the life she had built, all of it briefly transparent, and beneath it, still there, still intact, the things she had been managing for 11 years. Then the room came back. She crossed the floor. Old habit, old devastating habit. Captain Nikitin, she said. He was a general by then. She knew this. She used the old rank without deciding to. He looked at her. Something moved through his expression, controlled immediately, but she caught it. She had always caught everything he tried not to show her. I was sorry about your husband, he said. He was a good man. The silence between them had the specific texture of two people who possess an entire history. They have agreed, mutually and without discussion, not to raise. You didn't wait, she said. You told me not to. I know. A pause. I think I'm glad. He looked at her, the same look 11 years later, utterly undiminished. How are you? I am managing, she said. I am very good at managing. She paused. You? The same. A beat. I find I am exceptionally competent at everything except the things that matter. She almost smiled. The almost cost her something. We were always well matched that way. They stood in that for a moment, the weight of what it meant, the precision of it, the specific grief of two people who understand each other completely and have arrived at this understanding too late and in the wrong rooms. They talked for 40 minutes about the war, about Nikolai, about what Russia was becoming. Two genuine equals. The register of the conversation unchanged by 11 years and a marriage and two wars. This told her something she already knew and had spent 11 years knowing, that what they were to each other was not something that diminished with distance or revised itself with time. It was simply what it was. It would always be what it was. When he took his leave, he bowed correctly. He was, to the last, a man who understood the forms. At the door, he paused. He turned back. She thought for one suspended moment that he was going to say it, the thing that had been present in every conversation they had ever had, the thing that lived in every pause, that had written itself from a field hospital in Manchuria and been left open for 11 years. He said, I hope the managing becomes easier. She said, I hope the war ends. He smiled. The real one? The unguarded one. The one she had first seen at the Winter Palace, when she had said something honest and surprised him. Yes, both of those. He walked away. She watched him go. She stood very still until he was out of sight. She drove home through the frozen December city. Nikolai was asleep. The apartment was quiet. She sat at her desk. She took out a sheet of paper. She uncapped her pen. She sat there for a long time. The pen did not move. There was no address. There was no moment that had not already passed. There was nothing she could write that would arrive anywhere in time to matter. She understood this with the particular clarity of a person who has spent 11 years being exceptionally good at understanding things that cost them everything to understand. She capped the pen. She placed the blank page in the drawer. She went to bed. She would keep that blank page in the drawer for 25 years. The revolution came in 1917. The Volkansky family crossed into Finland by train in autumn. Her father uncomprehending, her brother practical. Nikolai, 11 years old, carrying his grandmother's suitcases down the stairs without being asked. Finland, then Stockholm, then Paris. She asked through the networks assembling in exile what Alexei Nikitin had chosen. He had stayed. From the same logic that had always governed him, a man does not abandon the country he gave his life to simply because it has revised its terms. He placed himself at the service of whatever Russia was becoming. It was still the land, still the people. She thought about a hand held for 4 seconds on Vasilyevsky Island, and what those 4 seconds had weighed, and what she had placed on the other side of the scale. Then she went to raise her son and maintain the appearance of a woman who had made her peace. In the autumn of 1939, through the last thin thread of her network, a name reached her. Alexei Nikitin. Dead. February 1937. A camp east of Omsk. 64 years old. Arrested on standard charges, paperwork serving a decision already made, bearing no relationship to what a man had actually done. He had stayed, he had served. The country he had stayed to serve had, in the end, treated his loyalty as irrelevant to his fate. She was in the boulangerie below her apartment when she received this. Coffee in front of her. The afternoon street outside conducting its indifferent Parisian business. The coffee went cold. She was 60 years old. She was alone. The man she had not chosen, because duty was not a cage but the actual grain of what she was, had died in Siberia 32 years after she had sat across from him in a small room and felt, in the 4 seconds he held her hand, the precise and complete weight of what she was choosing not to keep. She went upstairs. She opened the drawer. She took out the blank page she had placed there in December 1914 after sitting at her desk and finding no address for what she needed to say. 25 years. She had kept a blank page in a drawer for 25 years. She sat down. She picked up her pen. She looked at the page for a long time. This page that had been waiting since a December night when a man walked away across a frozen ballroom, and she stood watching and understood, finally and completely, that he was not coming back. Then she began to write, and this time she did not stop. She wrote everything. The window, the conversation, the 4 seconds on Vasilyevsky Island, the November meeting with her father, the 40 minutes in December 1914, and the almost smile that had cost her something. The blank page in the drawer, all of it. She wrote it to no one because there was no one left to write it to, and she wrote it to him because there had never been anyone else. She wrote, "I chose correctly. The choosing was real. Both things are true. I have spent 40 years treating this as a contradiction. It is not a contradiction. It is just what happened. It is just what we were." She wrote, "I think that counts for something. I think it has to." Back to Paris, 1949. Nikolai had been writing letters for a year, following the thread of 2 words in his mother's handwriting. He had the military record, the arrest, the camp, the date of death. He had assembled the outline of a man his mother had never mentioned and apparently never forgotten. He wrote one final letter to a contact with access to a quiet archival office, one of those operations assembling fragments of Soviet record-keeping through channels that were not discussed. He asked whether anything remained from the personal effects of Alexei Nikitin, arrested 1936, deceased February 1937. 6 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Inside, a single sheet, a transcription. At the time of Nikitin's arrest, his personal effects had been catalogued, as all such effects were, in the Soviet system's meticulous and merciless bureaucracy that recorded everything and understood nothing. Among the items listed was a letter, unsent, in the prisoner's own hand. No addressee. 1 paragraph. The contact had transcribed it in full. Nikolai read it at his kitchen table. Celeste was beside him. He read it once without speaking. Then he set it down. The paragraph read, "She was the only person who ever told me the truth about herself before she knew what I would do with it. I have thought about that for 32 years. I have thought about why the thing I remember most precisely is not the choice she made, but the window, the conversation, the specific quality of a person who says something honest in a room full of performance and trusts you to understand why it cost her something. I understood. I have always understood. I should have told her that I understood. I should have told her that was enough. I should have told her. I should have." The transcription ended there. At the bottom, the contact's note. The original appears unfinished. It is not possible to determine whether this was interrupted or concluded. Celeste read it over Nikolai's shoulder. "He should have told her," she said quietly. Nikolai didn't answer for a long time. He was looking at the book of French poetry on the table, his mother's book, 50 years old, the spine worn soft. He reached across and opened it to the inside back cover. Alexei Nikitin, 2 words, written with the specific deliberateness of a woman who knew exactly what she was writing and kept it there, between herself and the last page, for the rest of her life. He sat with both things in front of him, the name in her handwriting, the sentence that stopped mid-word, and understood for the first time what his mother had been managing. Not grief exactly, not regret exactly. Something without a single word. The lifelong weight of a choice made correctly and carried completely alone. The thing she had been so exceptionally good at not showing. The thing he had always sensed was there and had never been able to find. He closed the book. 2 people, 1 window, 1 conversation in a room where almost nothing honest was permitted. She crossed the floor. He did not adjust. And for 1 year, inside the rigid architecture of a world that demanded everything and permitted almost nothing, they were the same person, standing in the same light, speaking the same language, finding in each other the only place either of them had ever been entirely seen. Then the world asked what it always asks, and they gave it what they were made of. She kept his name in a book she carried for 50 years and showed to no one. He died with a sentence he could not finish in a labor camp east of Omsk, addressed to no one, about a window, about a conversation, about a woman who had said an honest thing in a room full of performance and trusted him to understand why it cost her something. He understood. He had always understood. He never told her. She wrote in pages, finally filled after 25 years of a blank drawer. I chose correctly. The choosing was real. Both things are true. That is all that remains of what they were to each other. The question I want to leave you with, and I want you to sit with it before you answer. Was duty the thing that separated them? Or was it the most honest name they had for something they were too afraid to test? Because there is a version of this story where two people chose honor, and there is another version where two people chose the word honor instead of choosing each other and called it the same thing. I don't know which version is true. I'm not certain they knew either. Tell me in the comments, did they make the right choice? And if you have ever kept a name somewhere private, somewhere only you would find it, I want to know that too. Like this video, subscribe and share it with someone who still has time to say the thing they haven't said yet. Thank you for watching.